Hi, fifth graders. Today we're going to be reading a book called Squantos Journey. It's by Joseph Bruchac. Bruchac, I think that's how you say his name. And it's illustrated by Greg Shed. And the reason we're going to read this story is because our last lesson was about the Mayflower Pilgrims in Plymouth. And just like when we did the Explorers unit, it's really important to look at history through the lens of the Native people who were in the Americas for thousands and thousands of years before the colonizers or colonists came and basically took their land. So this story is Squanto's told from Squanto's perspective of the first Thanksgiving. Okay, so I looked up a lot of words to see how to pronounce them. So if I mispronounce anything, I apologize in advance. But there were a lot of words in here that I wasn't sure how to pronounce. My story is both strange and true. I was born in the year the English call 1590. My families were leaders of the Patuxet people, and I too was raised to lead. But in 1614, I was taken to Spain against my will. Now it is 1621, and I am again in my homeland. My name is Squanto. I would like to tell you my tale. I look up and watch a heron flying overhead. It goes towards the falls that gave our people their name. We were the Patuxet, the people of the falls. Our cleared fields were not empty of people then, as they were when the English pilgrims landed in the freezing moon of 1620. Only 6 winters have passed, but so many things have changed. I remember that day in 1614. White men had come often to fish our bay and trade. They had brought us fine things in exchange for beaver and deerskins. This time, when their tall ships with sails like the wings of giant birds anchored offshore, this time was different. John Smith was one of the English captains. He and his officer, Thomas Dermer, traded with us. I liked the way Dermer shook my hand. Smith had learned much from dealing with other Indians in the summer land of Virginia. He knew we valued honor. The other captain was Thomas Hunt. After Smith left, Hunt landed at Patuxet. He told us he was Smith's friend. "Come to a feast on my ship," he said. More than 20 of us went aboard to share food with friends, but Hunt was no friend. He set sail, taking us with him as captives. Left behind were our families, our homes, our people. Our lives were no longer our own. So in this part of the story, Squanto tells how he was basically tricked. He and his people were tricked by the Europeans to just come on the ship to share a feast, but then they were actually basically kidnapped and taken captive. So Squanto talks about how his people are people of honor, and I'm sure for Native people who value honor so much, it's hard to believe that someone would do that. Soon we were crossing the wide salt waters. The journey was long, but my spirit did not desert me. I remember I was Nice, a man of courage. That word is spelled P-N-I-E-S-E, and it's a word that means a man of courage. I told stories to my people and urged them to stay strong. Hunt took us to Malaga in Spain, the land of Spain. There we were sold to be slaves, but men who served the Creator lived there. It was they who called themselves brothers, who freed us from our chains. I learned more of their language. I let them teach me about their ways of thanking the great mystery. I told them what I wanted most. I wanted to return home. With the friar's help, I went to England. English ships often sailed toward the sunset. I realized that if I could be of use to the English, they might take me with them. So he really wanted to go home, and was going to go back with the English to just see if he could get back to his land. That's on this side. It took much work, but I learned the language well. In March of the year they call 1619, I sailed back to New England at the side of my friend Thomas Dermer, one of John Smith's officers. Our memories of each other were like the taste of good water. He told me that things were not well between my people of the First Light and the English. Englishmen and their ships were now being attacked when they came to shore. Perhaps if I accompanied the English, I could speak with the Indians and they could trade again in peace. My heart felt as if it was soaring on an eagle's wings as the ship cut through the waves, but I also feared what I might find. Where there were this many people, he said, telling me of great illness in New England brought on by white traders, now only this many remain. He folded back all but 2 fingers. It proved, as he said, the sickness had come down upon the Patuxet like a blow of a war club. Only a few of my people survived. My wife, my children, my parents, and all those closest to me were gone. I will not say their names now. I will speak them again when my own feet climb the highest mountain and I walk the road of stars to greet them. So he knows that he lost his whole family, and his wife, his children, his parents, they all died because of the Europeans and the sickness they brought with them. We talked about that a lot when we talked about the explorers. Together, Thomas Dermer and I did our work. We made friendly contact with the Nemasket and Pokanoket. More than once, my words saved the life of my English friend. Peace seemed within our reach. But Epinau, the powerful sachem of Kapawak, viewed the English as one might a deadly serpent. Epinau, too, had been taken to England as a slave and brought back to act as a guide. He had escaped and vowed always to fight the white men. The deeds of the other Englishmen convinced his people that he was right. In the summer of 1620, as Thomas Dermer and I talked of peace, an English captain invited a party of Indians on board their ship. Then suddenly, the white men shot them down. When we reached the island of Kapawak, Epinau and his warriors attacked us. Many English were killed. Thomas Dermer was wounded. With my help, he was able to escape, but I was taken captive and given to the Pokanoket as a prisoner. So here, Squanto was coming with the Englishmen, but the English had done all of these horrible things to the native people, so then he was viewed as an enemy too. That November, when the Mayflower reached shore, the Pokanoket watched. They did not come close to the English. If the Pokanoket had been stronger, they might have attacked the white men, wiped them out, or driven them away. But the Pokanoket were still weak from the great sickness. Where there had been thousands, now there were hundreds. The strength of our people was so small now that the Narragansett to the south, untouched by the plague themselves, ordered the once proud Pokanoket and the Nemasket to pay them tribute. I spoke to Massasoit, the sachem of the Pokanoket, as a niece should. Remember, that's a man of honor. With respect and honor. Befriend the English, I said. Make them come to understand and support our people. Massasoit did not listen at first. He watched silently through that winter. So Squanto is trying to suggest that they make a peace with the Englishmen, even though these colonizers brought all this sickness and killed many of them and captured them and enslaved them. He was basically saying, we should just try to befriend them and make them understand us. And of course, Massasoit is very skeptical of that because, why should he trust these people? They basically killed off most of his people. So he doesn't want to. And he just watches for that winter. Then Samoset came to visit. He was a sachem of the Permiquid people who lived farther up the coast. He had done much trading with the English. He knew some of their language. Let me talk with the Songles Moniac. I'm not sure. I don't think I'm saying that right. But that's what he's calling the white men. He said to Massasoit, nodding to me as he spoke. Massasoit agreed. The next day, March 16th of 1621, Samoset strode into the English settlement. Welcome, English, he said in their tongue. He showed them the 2 arrows in his hand. One had a flint arrowhead, the other had an arrowhead removed. The arrows symbolized what were offered them, either war or peace. So war would be the arrowhead, and then peace would be the arrowhead removed. The English placed a coat about his shoulders to warm him. They invited him into one of their houses. They gave him small water, biscuits, and butter, pudding, and cheese. The food was so good, Samoset said to me later, laughing as he spoke. I decided to spend the night. When he left the next day, he promised to return with a friend who spoke their language well. So it was 5 days later, on the 22nd of March, I walked with Samoset back into my own village. Once Patuxet, now it was Plymouth. So Plymouth, the colony of Plymouth, was actually the Patuxet village. It was where they lived. And so the colonists just basically took it over. They just took their land and made it into a colony to live in. I looked around me. Though much was changed, I knew that I at last had returned to the land of my home. Perhaps these men can share our land as friends, I told my brother at my side. In the moons that followed, there was much work to do. The Bocanicat freed me to be a guide and interpreter for the English. Not only did I act as an envoy between the English and our people, I also had many things to teach the white people about survival. They knew little of hunting and almost nothing of planting. It had always been the job of the Patuxet women to care for the crops while the men, such as myself, hunted. But I had observed much in the years since my captivity. I had seen in Newfoundland how the English learned from our people how to grow corn. Use the small fish that wash up on our shores in great numbers, I told the English. Bury those fish in the earth and they will feed the corn. I showed them how to plant the seeds of corn and beans and squash together in hills. I told them when it was the moon of hoeing. They listened well and worked hard. I came to see that these pilgrims could be our friends and we theirs. Together we might make our home on this land given to us by the Creator of all things. A good harvest was brought in this fall. Some of the English crops have not done well, but the 3 sisters, the corn and beans and squash, have done well. As I look at the beans growing up about the stalks of the corn, I think about how our 2 people have become entwined. I feel hope for our children in the seasons to come. With our help, the English have learned enough of hunting and fishing to provide the food for the great feast, such as this one, the feast for all our people. Now we eat together. I give thanks. I have seen more in my life than most men, whether Indian or English. I have seen both death and life come to this land that give itself to English and Indian alike. I pray that there will be many more such days to give thanks together in the years that follow. And so there is a picture of some of the foods that were eaten at that time. And corn, beans, and squash were things that the native people already grew on the land and knew how to grow on the land. But they also, because they had lived on the land for thousands and thousands of years, they also knew what berries to forage for and nuts and what animals to hunt and where. So they had all this knowledge that they gave to the Englishmen as they offered like a peace with them. I am Squanto. I am known to all of those who gather here, English, Pokanoket, Namaskut, even a few of my own surviving Patuxets. I speak to you as a niece, a man of honor. I will never leave this land. I give thanks for all of our people to the Creator of all things. And there's a last picture of Squanto. One thing that this book doesn't go on about, which we're going to talk about in the next lesson, is that peace that was made, it didn't last. So there was always the colonizers coming in and trying to take more of the native people's land, and that went on for all of this time and beyond. So the peace really didn't last very long, and that's a big part of the story that gets left out. So we're going to talk about that in the next lesson. We're also going to talk about the Mayflower Compact and the start of the colonist government, but also we'll talk about the history of the native people that were affected by the colonists, and how they lived too, because their story is an important part. Okay, so I have a couple of discussion questions on Schoology for you to do, and I will see you next time.